I'm Katrina, this is Tare, and today we are talking worms. So I have these two worm houses, vermiculture, as they say, and I want to talk to you about them. Now this is in a pretty dimly lit corner of my screen and porch, and so I have lights going. Hopefully it's the right light. And also we have a rainstorm coming, so if I have to battle talking over rain, that is the case. I'm also still sick, so hey, there you go. Anyway, worms are an excellent way for you to take your waste out of your kitchen and make some really good stuff. Now I'm going to talk to you guys while I do this this project here, and every so often, depends on how often you feed the worms and depends on how much stuff is in there, how healthy your vermiculture area is, and all of that. It depends on all that, how long it takes for the material to break down. I basically do it when the top one gets full and I need more room. That's when I do it. I wish I had another tray for this one. I'll take you guys in here and show you which ones I have. I have two different ones, and I'll let you know why I like this one better. So this is the one I like. There's the thing there. I guess I should turn this. All right, there's some of the name, Australian design mark, manufacturer, worm factory, patent number, and so this is the one I like. It has holes in the top. It only has 2 trays. I want more trays. If you guys know where to get more of this, I don't think they make them anymore, let me know. And then it has a spout on the bottom, and you put a container in there to catch the leachate, which is the liquid part. Now you're gonna see some daddy long legs and some paper, and you know, this is not the tidiest place in the world, and that's fine. Here is my other worm bin, and I don't use this as much. I tend not to put as much stuff in there. Again, this is in the screen porch. I consider it outside. It's Worm Factory. This is the one that you can typically get, you know, online. Also has a spout at the bottom. It's the same general idea. However, it has these gaps in between each layer, and worms can get out and moisture gets out. This one, the gaps really are not big, and when you open the lid, it has this thing that blocks it from worms getting out of the handle. And then inside you have, you know, like I have worms right there on top of the paper. It's a good system. We have some other insects in here that have found their way in here, but it's good, doesn't smell bad, it's all good. And yes, looks like I do have some mold growing in there. I think that was in there when I put in there. Not the best idea, but it works. So the first thing I do when I empty this is I take off the lid, I flip it over, look for worms. There's going to be worms on them. Those worms I like to save because, oh, there's a slug. How does slug get in here? That's going to get fed to a chicken. Where do I put it to make sure it gets fed to a chicken? Right there. I don't usually have slugs in here, so I don't know how it got in there. But there are other little critters in here, little insects and all that. Now you don't want things like maggots and stuff like that. If you have maggots, it's too wet. But I am going to collect these worms and toss them back in, because this lid is going to be off for quite some time and I don't want them to dry out. So once this lid doesn't have any worms on it, I set it aside. Your worm bed should not stink. So if it's stinking, it probably has either something in there that's not breaking down because they're not eating it. I had ginger do that one time. It ended up molding pretty bad and they didn't eat it. Or it's too wet. So in that case, add shredded paper. I highly recommend getting paper, like, so this stuff that I have in here, it's shredded and it's like, it shreds it and it cuts it. So it's like these little tiny pieces. They break down the best and that works for me. So looks like I do have some mold in there, which is not good, but They're in there. All right. So first thing I do is I take the top layer off. I take the bottom layer off, and then I put them both back on. This is heavy. If you are not good at lifting weights or lifting things, maybe you take that off and then put it somewhere else, and or have a different system. So the reason why I do that is because light makes the worms go down. They don't like light, which is why we keep them in dark, and there we go. So right now I just have a couple buckets out here. Normally I use a wheelbarrow to use this for, and it's outside. I have the green stalk kind of blocking the way. It's too much. So I'm gonna put them on a couple buckets. Always lift with your legs. And actually I'm gonna move this. Always lift with your legs. No back injuries. Alright, these are on here. I'm gonna let this sit here and make sure that anything on top goes down. And I'm actually gonna show you one other thing before I put it back. Okay, this is the bottom, and this is not supposed to be mucky like this. There's where the spout is. So here's the spout. It's not supposed to be mucky like this. It's been a while since I did this. I really wish the spout that this was angled. The perfect one would have had an angled one. But this doesn't have that. That's one thing bad about this. So I'm gonna scoop that out first. So I have a painter's bucket. There's a bunch of them on the side of the road someone was getting rid of. And so I grabbed it. Now, this bottom part is gonna be super wet. You're not gonna have live worms in here. If you do have live worms in there, they won't be live for very long because it's too wet for the worms. Usually it's not this thick though, so I haven't done this in a while. It's not stinky though, has good nutrition, it's all good. Okay. Now that I have roughly cleaned that out, I'm going to put both of these back on. And I think I am going to do one at a time, so I am going to set the top one somewhere else and then put the bottom one on. Which again, we're switching. This one used to be on the bottom. Lifting with the legs. So this is now the bottom. I will no longer be adding anything to this bottom layer. Everything added is going to be to this top layer once I take it out. Okay, so once we have the bottom layer on and the top layer over here, or the new top layer, we're going to put the lid back on the bottom layer. Keep them nice and dark and let them continue their feast. So something to think about when doing this is you're going to find a lot of things. You're going to find, let's see what we can find, cherry pits. It's been that long. Cherries are from last summer. So between last summer and today, I've cleaned out one tray of these. So cherry pits are in there. Doesn't matter if you have that in your garden or not. That's up to you. Avocado pits are another thing. Oh, this is a peach pit side of things. You know, you're going to see avocado skins. These ones are not quite broken down. But you have to decide for you whether or not it matters to you if that's in your garden. Another thing, when I started, I was wanting to save every little worm and put it back into the system. And I also was trying to save every little worm casing, which means like the baby eggs. And if you would like to spend hours and hours of your life doing this, go right ahead. I did that for probably 3 times that I went through, and it took forever. I even made a fancy like tumbler thing, and what I found is, for the most part, what's going to happen here is that the worms that are in here have gone down to the bottom of this one. So when we had them stacked, you can have them stacked for longer if you want. I'm probably going to find worms on the floor and on top of the buckets that I have them on when I take this up. In that case, I'll take those and I'll put them back. For me, it doesn't matter if those worms go to the garden. And that's a decision you're going to have to make yourself, how much time you want this to take and all of that. Now, I'll bring you guys down here so you can see the process and all that. It goes pretty quickly if you don't care about certain things getting in your garden. Now, things like avocado peels, I like to have those a little more broken down because once they go into the garden, it gets drier. So this is a moist environment, and they end up not breaking down as well. And that's okay. They can be in your garden as mulch. That's completely fine. Sometimes I think it's okay, and sometimes I don't. So I just do whatever I'm feeling that day, because no matter what, it's not going to harm the garden. So that's important to note, is that once this is done, it's not going to harm the garden. It's also not like hot manure, right? So this is a manure. So what worm castings are, and if you buy them, you might be sold as worm castings, or black gold is another name for it. It's called black gold because it's valuable. Worth his weight in gold. And it is worm poop. So they process the paper shreds and the food scraps, and they've processed that into worm poop. And if you're in here, I mean, it doesn't smell bad at all. It smells like earthy. It smells like something you can grow in. It's not bad at all. So it's not a hot manure, right? You can use this directly on your pots. In fact, a couple years ago, I just put it on the top. I top dressed some of the pots in my screen and porch, and then I was gonna put them outside in the spring. And what happened is I had tomatoes growing from nothing. I had tomatoes growing, and they were growing in, I think, December. I had some tomatoes in the screen porch that were this big, only because I started watering the compost, or started watering this. Now, why does that happen? Why didn't the worms eat that? Worms generally don't eat the hard parts, so they're not going to eat seeds, and tomato seeds, they live through everything. And like these cherry pits in here, they will eventually deteriorate and go away, but it's not because of the worms. It's because they're breaking down and decaying. Or it could be some of the other little critters in here. Yeah, so let's get started, and I'll show you how I do this. If you do this a different way, put it in the comments, let us know. And yeah, this can go directly on your garden. You can dry it if you want. You can save it in a soil bag. It does tend to get hard if it is not in something plastic or something like that. But I am going to put it in the bucket for now, and then after this next storm, I'm going to distribute it around the yard. I don't want to distribute it right now because while I want it to get watered in, I don't want it to get watered in and leach all the way through and be useless. So we're supposed to we have a flood advisory, which I'm out of flood water and all that, but we have a flood advisory coming up this next, at the beginning of next week. So I personally will leave it in a bucket for a few days, and it'll be fine. So, all right, let's bring you in here and get this done. All right, to start off, so there's a piece of paper in there. I don't really want paper in my garden. It, blows away and all that. It will break down. But this is very, very done. Okay. A lot of people starting out with their worm compost and their vermiculture, they think it's done. It's not done. It's not done when you think it's done. Hold on like 3 more months. And that is something that people a lot of times say, oh yeah, that's done, and then it's not. If you can see paper in it, it's not done. If you can identify foods, I mean, besides things like, you know, peach pits and avocado skins, if you can identify like foods that are not broken down yet, it's not done. So these parts, I would argue, are not done. What I generally do is save this kind of stuff aside, and I use a scoop. Usually I use a ladle, but I don't know where it is. This is like a funky ladle, but not usually the one I use. But I usually start in one corner, and oh, that's fun. That's not me. I did not put a spoon in this. Somebody else did. So, you can find treasures. That's fun. So, on the bottom here, it has little slats. I'll try and zoom in on that, or another place later on. The chickens are talking up a storm. So there's these little slats, and those are access points that the worms can go through to get between the layers. So what I tend to do is I open up a space so that I can throw this kind of stuff in there, and it won't go in my final bucket here, and it will have more time to break down. Like here's it looks like a apricot pit, and it looks like it's kind of partially open. I don't know. You can also get, so here's a worm. Usually I actually have that open, but because I don't have my wheelbarrow, when I have my wheelbarrow, I actually leave this set on top of the other one, and then I have a pile in the wheelbarrow for like worm stuff. But I think what we'll do is I'll just kind of get a scoop of this stuff to start. I put a worm in the little container over here. And I do want to save some of them out. Now this one has been in here for a while. This is an old pumpkin. I want to say pumpkin handle. That's not what they're called. But you can see it's starting to break down. It will eventually break down, and I'm not including it in the compost right now. Whether I include stuff incidentally in it right now, I mean, I'm fine with that. There's going to be a lot of peach pits in here, I know that. Okay, this is not the best ladle. I have a perfect ladle and I don't know where it is. I think I'm going to just let the peach pits go into the worm castings, go into my collection, because there's just so many of them in here. And they'll be okay in the garden. Now I have had things sprout in the garden, or in this. I had a piece of metal. I have had many avocados sprout, and I have had a couple mangoes sprout. Now I'm not a fan of mango, but other people here are, so that is what they go in here, the seeds go in here and it sprouted. And I actually grew a mango tree until the point of it actually, it froze. It frosted and froze. So it looks like not many worms are in here. There's a worm. The more broken down the compost, the least worms there will be, because there's not much for them to eat. So if there's no food there, why would they be there, right? Like I said, I don't need to save every single one. They can go live in the yard if there's too much too much trouble to go through. And they'll be, you know, I'm sure they'll be happy there. Now, what kind of worms do you use? These are red wigglers, and red wigglers are different than your fishing worms, right, which are just earthworms. They have, where'd it go? You can see there's pumpkin seeds. I've had pumpkins starting here too. Red wigglers, they have different muscle movements even than the earthworms, but they actually are the ones that eat basically the food, right? Eat your food scraps. And when they do that, they produce these things. Now, would an earthworm do the same thing? They're not quite the same. They do process things, but they don't really process things the same. Now, this is a tea bag, and I just throw the whole tea bag in. I know sometimes they have a little staple on it. I'm okay with that. That's something you guys will have to assess for yourself. So, like, there's a little one. They do get bigger than this. And they will reproduce. They will reproduce according to the space and food available. So if there's not much space or not much food, then they don't have as many babies. So it's not like you're going to have an overpopulation. But we have stuff here. I'm not sure what that is. Oh, they're seeds. These are tomatillo seeds. So, yeah, all those little white specks are tomatillo seeds. So we can put that in there, and by doing that, we can have some tomatillo seeds that basically have perfect compost right next to them, and then they'll be in the garden, and then they can self-sow. So, or not self-sow, they can grow. I don't know who put foil in here. And so they can grow once they're out. And that's actually how, whoops. And that's actually how I got my, ground cherry to grow out there. I didn't plant it. I bought some ground cherries at Safeway, and they were, you know, already peeled, and oh, we got something that sprouted. I kind of cut it off, but sprouts do start here. And it's something, you know, started, and I was like, okay, well, what the heck's with that? You know, I don't know what that thing is. And it started in the garden, but what I had forgotten was that that long time ago, as you guys see, I'm doing this half a year after I put some of this stuff in. I got some ground cherries at Safeway, and they were disgusting. They were so disgusting, I actually just fed it to the worms. Expensive worm treats. You don't have to buy treats for your worms, guys. So yeah, that is something that it was a surprise to me. Let me look at all these good seeds, but they might grow, they might not grow. I'll let them volunteer if they want to. And so that's something that I learned is you have the potential to have seeds come up. So what do you have is you have the potential for things to grow in your garden that you didn't plant. And something important to remember about that is if you are going to grow a specific variety for a specific reason, like saving seed, or you really want that variety and not any other variety, maybe don't put the worm compost there. If you know, or if you think you may have put a similar type seed into the worm bin. So one example of that would be tomatoes. So tomatoes are something that people cross, that people store seeds that are, man, pay attention to what you shred, guys. There's little silver shreds in here. So people can cross tomatoes, people can make special varieties, you know, their own special flavor, and you can also save hybrid seed. So if you are trying to grow a tomato specifically for something like that, then it can be really important for you to not put, you know, potential other seeds in the same area. Because they will sprout. I've had that happen from the worm castings. So that's just something to pay attention to. And then other things to pay attention to when you're putting things in the worm bin is, like I keep on picking out the silver stuff. If you are shredding junk mail, which is a fantastic use for junk mail, those little plastic windows, take them out. Anything inside the envelope, open the envelope. Make sure it's not, I don't even know what the plastic, what this foil stuff was, but it was obviously something that went through the shredder. Don't use things like magazine paper that has some stuff in it that's not good. Newspaper is generally good. Most newspapers use a soy-based ink these days. And most things are fine. Most junk mail is fine. People get really, really into this and may have differing opinions, and that's fine. You can leave helpful, nice worded comments down below and about what you use and what you don't use. If it's not nice, I don't want to hear about it. So, those type of things can be put in. Something to avoid is things like stickers on your fruit. Yeah. I think it's interesting that we have stickers on our fruit because to me, I think the people selling it should know what it is, but that's a personal opinion apparently, without a sticker. And side note, I would like to know what the sticky part of the sticker is, because if it's on an organic, non-sprayed fruit, I want to know what the sticky stuff is on the sticker. I'm not like gonna get up in arms about it. I'm just curious. If you know, let me know. Anyway, that was a side note. So for what do you actually put in, what you can and cannot put into a home worm bin system. Things that should not go in includes things like citrus, and to my understanding, that's mostly the peel, and I don't know if the actual fruit that's true as well, but I mean, come on, eat your fruit, guys. The peel has an acid, so when you peel an orange and you go into it and you put your thumbnail in and it goes and it has that zesty like thing that sometimes gets in your eye and burns. Well, worms don't have thick skin like we do, and it burns them. So they're gonna avoid that. So it's not so much that it's bad for them, it's that they're going to avoid it. So here's another little worm. So that's my understanding of that. Other things to avoid are alliums. Those are things like garlic and onions and leeks, that whole family. And again, it has something to do with some compound of something, and I don't remember what it's called or anything like that. Bread is something to avoid. It does not break down fast enough. Your worms are not going to eat it, really. And so that's something to avoid. And then meats and dairy. So again, this is not a hot system. This is a system by animals of sorts. If you would like to do things like meats and breads, I mean, get chickens, get quail, or you can do black soldier fly colony. I don't have one of those. I would really like one. But they eat basically everything. So yeah, those are some things to avoid. I'm sure there are other things to avoid. Yeah, milk products, obviously, you don't want that to go rancid and go yucky and get yucky. So those are things to avoid. If you are starting out a worm bin, my suggestion is not to buy them online. My suggestion is find someone in your area. Find someone local to you. Find someone who knows what they're doing, successful and has a successful worm bin already happening. Because part of the success for starting a worm bin is not just the worms. It's a little bit of this, a little bit of this is actually what makes it successful. You have the bacterias, you have some of the other little microorganisms in there already. You have a community already. And much as you would inoculate a system, like if you're inoculating a pond with some barley bacteria or some bacteria that's local, or you're inoculating some plants with some fungus, like mycorrhizae, much as you would inoculate other things, inoculating your startup for your worms is going to be important. Not only that, but you will also be able to see the consistency of what your bedding, what your situation should look like. I recommend starting with some, I mean, if you have some garden soil from your garden or even potting soil, have some of that in the bottom of your very first one. You put down a little bit of newspaper, and then put down just a little bit, like a little bit, just because it will help to hold a little bit of the moisture at the correct moisture level. And when you're doing that, I think it's going to be a much better, it's going to be a much better situation. So next, I'm going to talk about placement. So placement of worm bins is important. It took me a very long time to figure out where the perfect place was for these worm bins. You want it not in direct sunlight. These guys don't like heat. They don't like to be hot. So if they are going to get hot, they are going to try and leave the worm bin. And not only that, if they don't leave the worm bin, then they die. So I have had that happen. I had to restart. Luckily, I got my worms from a friend of mine, and he was able to give me more. And then later, when they had a lot of water go into his by accident, I was able to give him some of the worms back to restart his. So developing those relationships, having those relationships anyway, but developing those relationships where you can help each other out and provide assistance, or like, hey, yeah, I have some extra, or, you know, I would really like to get everyone started doing this. You're able to do that then. And then also may also be connected with a larger group of people because of the people that other person is connected with. So my recommendation is to start with, you know, not only ask for some worms, but also ask for, you know, a big clump of worm castings. And when you do that, you're going to get the best for success. And another thing I learned, it takes a while for your system to get right. Once your system is right, it's super, super easy. It doesn't need very much attention at all. It takes a while. For a long time, I didn't have a paper shredder. I relied on, I can just rip it up. You know, I'm fairly frugal. Those of you who know me, I'm fairly frugal. And I was ripping up paper, and it took so much time, and it didn't get very small. Once I invested in a paper shredder that has the cross shredding as well, I mean, it gets processed so quickly, and they use that so quickly. So why am I putting paper in there? I guess I should address that. It's for moisture control, and then also for any sort of composting that you're doing. It's good to have greens and browns. Now, kitchen scraps are typically going to be greens, and paper is brown. So that is a good reason to have that. And you can control, like, if you get fruit flies in your worm bin, that means it's too wet. So add some paper. You know, if it's too dry, you need less paper. This is probably the least amount of worms I've had to pick out of one of these things. I'm almost up to a full 5-gallon bucket of worm casting, which, if you want to buy that in the store, it's going to cost you. So saving money is another thing. Some people have these in their kitchens as well. Some people are grossed out by that. It doesn't stink. If you're doing it right, it shouldn't stink. You shouldn't be able to smell anything but a fresh, earthy I mean, I can't smell it. Like, I mean, I know I'm sick, but like, it's not even as fragrant as like a potting soil. I mean, it smells like earth, but not strong at all. So this mixture has tons and tons of squash seeds or pumpkin seeds, and they're gonna be old because I usually feed those to the birds. So it must have been a time where I had a super abundance of it. So I want to keep that in mind when I put these places is, hey, these things might come up. And then you could either let them grow where they are, pull them up, or transplant them. And you guys know I love volunteers. I'll put a video up here about volunteers in the garden. And if you put out compost and they grow, by compost I'm saying the worm castings, and something grows out of it, that means you put it in the right spot. That means it's getting the right amount of moisture, the right amount of sun, all that stuff. So that's another way to actually assess your garden space, is to know what is in your worm castings, and then actually put that into like, oh, well, I know there was seeds of this over here and over here, but it only did well over here. Well, then plant those things over there. So it's a good assessment. All right, we are almost done. Does it matter if you get every single little thing out of here? No. Like I said, you're going to save that biology. No, it's another tray, so it'll migrate into these trays. But you're going to save that biology that's in here, that life, and it will be good for the next tray use. All right, so now that this is empty, I have a whole pile over here it's mostly peach pits and avocado peels, and I didn't find any avocado pits, so this must have been my second time doing this, throwing these aside. So I typically kind of spread this out just a little bit, just to kind of get that biology around. This can go in. And then your hands are all yucky, right? I'm gonna grab some paper and put that in here. Oh, looks like there's a piece of plastic. Oh, that's interesting. That tea bag had a plastic on there. Interesting. Okay, that's gonna come off. If you're feeling like you have yucky hands, just take some shredded paper, go like that. It'll at least dry it off some, so you can better handle things. It's gonna get dirty anyway, guys. There you go. So I keep a box of pre-shredded paper just for this. I put a layer, that might be a little thicker than I usually do, but I put a layer on the bottom, and then I'll put in my food scraps. Some of them are starting to rot, or starting to mold. Usually take them out, but I'm gonna just put them in this time. I think my worms are good enough that they'll be okay with it. All right, I made a bunch of guacamole. We're putting more of these in there. They will break down, guys. Have some potato peels and some, oh, we got fruit flies, that's not good. Some banana peels. And guys, these worms love bananas. So, take a note for me and do not keep these out for long. Alright, and then I'm going to put more paper. And you want to put them out on paper that will prevent future fruit flies, so I'm good with that. And I have squash peels. So these are my volunteer squashes. I could give them to the chickens and the quail, but they tend not to eat the skins. They got they got the seeds and the fleshy bits. But they tend not to eat the peels, so the worms get those. Usually I do this after I put it back on, but we have good lighting here, so there we go. Always end with paper. Some people like to keep like a whole sheet of newspaper on the top. I used to, and I found it was unnecessary. You guys figure out what works for you. Let me know what works for you in the comments. Some people don't do colored paper in theirs either. For me, I'm going for it. All right, so that looks full, but it's not. Like they will eat that down really, really quickly. All right, let's put this back on. Lift with the legs. It's pretty light. I do like to kind of squish it down a little bit. Make sure the corners are down. And I do squish it down just so it has that contact. Because again, this is the area that they can escape through if it's not down. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I do keep the spout open all the time and keep this container under there and then empty it when it gets full. Usually when it overflows, which is not good, but this is a super good system. I cannot find this one anymore. I can find the other one. The other one is readily available. It works, but it dries out and the worms tend to go away. So I pretty much prefer this system, and it's a really, really great thing to do to take care of the kitchen scraps and things like the peels that the birds aren't going to eat and stuff like that. So this is a really good system. I definitely recommend worm castings as a way to fertilize your garden, regardless of whether or not you have the actual worms. I highly recommend getting your worms from someone who has them locally. You're going to have a great source of knowledge for all sorts of things. You know, people who do this usually know other things like gardening. People who do these things that's not usually their only hobby. So I encourage you to meet new people, have these relationships with, you know, sharing knowledge and maybe trading things and all of that, and learn to not waste and learn from each other. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please give it a like if you liked it, and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Hit the bell notification, select all, because we have lots to learn on this channel. There's all sorts of homesteading topics, and vermiculture is just one. I only have a few videos because I don't really do much with it. It doesn't take much work. However, it provides a lot of stuff. Let's show you the bucket and we'll say goodnight. All right, here's the bucket. 5-gallon bucket. Might be more than 5 gallons. Anyway, it is a lot of worm casting right there. Have a wonderful day.